Thank you very much. I'm Dr. John Paul, the Peter Paul and Elizabeth Hagen Professor of the History of Christianity at United Lutheran Seminary with campuses in Philadelphia and Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I'm also the author of Fethullah Gulen, A Life of Hizmet, Why a Muslim Scholar in Pennsylvania Matters to the World, the first critical biography of Fethullah Gulen in English. It's my distinct honor to be here and to welcome our distinguished guests who have just joined us. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. Let's give ourselves a round of applause for starting this distinguished panel, and we're going to change the order just a little bit, and we're going to begin with Salim Abdallah. We then have Sheikh Mohammed Al-Tafour Rahman, who will join us virtually. And then go to Gada Ghazal, and then return to Margaret Kosal, from whom we heard earlier. Salim Abdullah Ahmed is Research Assistant at the Harmony Institute for Interfaith and Interreligious Dialogue and a Master's Student in Theology, Religion, and Science at the Global Ministries University. He's writing a thesis on mitigating climate change in Kenya through the teachings and values of Fethullah Gulen and Pope Francis, and the title of his presentation is From Dialogue to Coexistence, Cultural Diversity Through the Lens of Hizmet. Please join me in welcoming Salim Abdullah Ahmed.
Thank you so much, Professor. Distinguished, respected scholars, colleagues, and friends, good morning. It is a pleasure and an honor to share a talk with you today. First is an inspiration for us as a Harmony Institute from Kenya, Africa, to travel all the way to India. So it's a huge thank to Jindal Global University and also Indialogue. So we gather at a time when cultural, religious, and ethnic diversity is one of the most defining reality of our global moment, and yet also one of the most contested pressing issues. In this talk, I want to explore how Hizmet moves from dialogue to coexistence. I will briefly introduce its philosophical foundation, then examine its practice of dialogue as a transformative process, and finally illustrate these ideas through a concrete case with Harmony Institute in Kenya. The first is an Hizmetic vision from necessity to conviction. The starting point of my paper is simple but challenging. Claim: peaceful coexistence today cannot be based only on legal arrangement or on putting up with each other. Laws are necessary, but they are not enough. We need to move, as I phrase it, from coexistence by necessity to coexistence by conviction, where people want to live together across difference because they see moral and spiritual value in doing so. Fethullah Gulen himself insists that diversity is not an accident, but part of God's design, commenting on a Quranic verse that God made us a nation and tribes that you may know each one another. He argues that difference in ethnicity, language, and even religion is a context for knowing, not justification for hostility. In one of his reflections on diversity in society, he writes that accepting diversity honestly is an important step toward the future where diversity is not going to constitute a problem for us. That perspective undercut any attempt to impose cultural uniformity as a religious deal. This theological affirmation of diversity is shaped by Sufi influence in his Gulen thoughts: love, humility, and awareness of God's sign in every person. This is why, for Hizmet, cultural and religious differences are not simply to be tolerated. They are to engage as occasion for mutual learning and spiritual growth. So looking into the three main core values which I chose for this paper, where is hospitality, compassion, and service. Hizmet operationalized this vision through these three key ethical values: hospitality, compassion, and service. So the first one is hospitality. So in the Abrahamic tradition, welcoming the stranger is more than good manners. It is a sacred duty. Hizmet takes this seriously as both personal and institutional level. Homes, school, dialogue center, and cultural programs are all understood as a space where the other, in quote, should be feel at home. Hospitality becomes a social pedagogy. It teaches people gently that the other's presence is a blessing rather than a threat. The second one is marhamet, or called compassion. So Hoja Effendi repeatedly insists that genuine faith requires empathy and caring for the suffering of others, regardless of their identity. In his reflection on love and tolerance, he states, we should have such tolerance that we are able to close our eyes to the fault of others, to have respect for different ideas, and to forgive everything that is forgivable. This is not a call to naivete, but a moral stance in which our first instinct is mercy, understanding, not suspicion. The last one is about the hizmet, or khidma, or service. Service is, in this tradition, is not a side activity. It is a spiritual discipline and a civic responsibility. Hoja Effendi once described the path to the people's heart in striking terms. The shortest way to conquer people's heart is the way of love. Once hearts are won by love, there is no problem left that cannot be solved. Service, education, social work, relief, or dialogue is seen as the concrete expression of love. Now, let's turn now to the dialogue itself. For Hizmet, dialogue is not optional, and it is not a merely polite conversation. So even Ojafenim says that dialogue is must for us. It is an integral to how believers relate to God and others in plural world. In his book, The Necessity of Interfaith Dialogue, A Muslim Perspective, Ojafendi insists that religion are meant to bridge, to unify humanity on the path to virtue, not to divide it. He thus called on Muslims to seek shared ethical ground with people of others' faith while remaining true to their own conviction. In another says on tolerance, he writes, we should respond with mildness so that we can touch other people's heart by following a method consisting of a tender heart, a gentle approach, and a mild behavior. In Hizmet I decide to have 3 dialogue typically for Hizmet. The first one is encounter through hospitality, where now people come together. We share a meal as it becomes a normal in many gathering, and where now sometime we having a school open days or a community event. So these encounters lower the temperature and begin to erode stereotypes. So the first one is through having people come together. And then we have another one is a structured dialogue. Building on that, dialogue centers and institutions organize conversation on the themes like family, ethics, peace, or social justice. The goal is not to win the debate, but to understand and to be understood. The last one is the ethical commonality and cooperation. Over time, participants often discover shared values, concern for the poor, respect for the human dignity, desire for peace. This becomes the basis for cooperation in the service, in service project and advocacy. In this way, dialogue moves from contact to relationship, and from relationship to joint action. Ojefendi summarized the logic beautifully in an essay on love and tolerance. Love, compassion, tolerance, and forgiving are the pillars of dialogue. The point is not to dilute faith, but to humanize relations so that communities can live and work together without abandoning their belief. Now from encounter to ethical commonality, whereby we're bridging faith and modernity. A distinctive contribution of Hizmet is an attempt to reconcile Islamic spirituality with modern secular democratic values. Gulen critiques both radical secularism and religious fundamentalism. He argues that believers can and should participate constructively in a pluralistic democracies, not by demanding privilege, but by contributing universal values grounded in their faith. And this is now shown in several ways. One is through support for human rights, rule of law, and transparent governance as expression of Islamic justice. Another one is affirmed rejection of violence, dialogue, education, persuasion are the legitimate means of social changes. And the last one is an investment in women education and participation in public life, linking gender inclusion to broader social well-being. This project has not been without cost. The movement has faced serious repression in Turkey, yet globally its schools and dialogue initiative continue, offering a lived example of how religion can support rather than undermine democratic pluralism. For us, for our real example is about the Harmony Institute, which is based in Nairobi, which is also a leading institute in East Africa with Tanzania and Uganda. So, to avoid remaining abstract, my paper includes a case study, Harmony Institute in Nairobi, Kenya. Harmony Institute is a multi-religious, multi-ethnic organization that seeks to foster peace, justice, and social cohesion through interfaith dialogue, cultural understanding, and joint action. It embodies key Hizmet values in an East African context that face its own mix of dialogue of religious diversity, historical tension, and ecological stress. Let me highlight two of its flagship initiatives. So the first one is about the scriptural reasoning. So scriptural reasoning, whereby Harmony Institute is doing it on a monthly basis. It convenes participants from different faith traditions, Muslim, Christian, Brahma Kumaris, Baha'i faith community, Hinduism, Krishna, and all other religions, to read and discuss their sacred text side by side. They may read passages from Quran, the Bible, or other scriptures around the themes such as peace, family, justice, or care for creation. Whereby, whenever we have this monthly program, we have a study leader. So a study leader may come from any other tradition, whether Islam, Christian, Baha'i, Brahma Kumaris, Hindu, Krishna, and then we select verses from both, and we discuss, whereby we want to understand each other. So the theme can be ranged from marriage, also about family, education, schools, and as Harmony Institute has been able to move around all religious worship places. We have been through synagogues, we have been through a Muslim mosque, we have been churches, we have been school, whereby we organize and invite people, and for actually it has been able to be a fruitful conversation. This method is simple but powerful. Participants listen carefully to how each community understands its own context. They ask open questions, seeking clarity rather than confrontation. They acknowledge both convergence and difference without forcing agreement. Over time, participants report that such encounters deepen empathy, challenge prejudice, and reveal common ethical concern. Scriptural reasoning thus become both an educational and peace-building tool, very much in line with the Gulen calls to prioritize gentle words and heart-to-heart communication even when serious disagreements remain. And the second one is about the climate change. Climate awareness and creation. Okay. So the second one is where climate change awareness and environmental stewardship. Harmony Institute collaborate with Catholic Network inspired by Laudato Si within East Africa and the Youth Climate Movement to organize workshop, forum, and campaign on creation care. On the last 2 years, we have been able to organize with the Amani Community Center and the Catholic University, where we had APES, African Peace and Environmental Summit, in 2024 and 2025. And for this year, 2026, we are also co-organizing with our sisters, Gulen Interfaith Dialogue in Tanzania, Kilimanjaro Dialogue Institute, whereby we're also going to have our third APES, African Peace and Environmental Summit, where we usually invite practitioners to come on environment, climate, and dialogue. So we hopefully also, we warmly invite our hand to our dear Behzat Fatimi and his committee and all members here to come and participate for us, which is going to happen on September, end of September and early October. Now, closing remarks. Let me close with a final thought from Gulen that captures the spirit of this approach, reflecting on dialogue, tolerance, he writes. We should have such a broad tolerance that we can close our eyes to our own fault and show respect for different ideas and forgive everything that is forgivable. Even when our inalienable rights are violated, we should respect human values and try to establish justice. In a world marked by polarization and fear, this is a demanding ethic. But movement like Hizmet and institution like Harmony Institute in Kenya shows that it's not merely an ideal. It can be a practice taught and embedded in concrete communities. If diversity is indeed a divine reality, as Hizmet claim, then our task is not to erase it, but to learn through dialogue, hospitality, and service, and how to turn it into a source of coexistence, justice, and peace. Thank you.